Being Silver Threads, from the World of the Silver Thread Chronicles, by Thomas M. Firghil II. Copyright 2024 by Thomas M. Firghil II. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Catching a Rundig. Hi, my name is Fabula. I am a fairy who recently returned from my time abroad. Like all fairies, I followed the author's plan for me and traveled the world, bringing beauty to nature. I made flowers bloom, frost swirl, and eggs hatch. No one saw me because of the Fairy Queen's magic that makes me invisible. I loved to travel and see everything that the author had made. That is, until I met the Firghils. They are a human family of 10 that lives outside of Larimore. Though they have never met me, I feel like they are my family for how well I know them. If you are interested, I will tell you a few tales about them that I hope will explain why I came to love them and have found such great joy in watching their story unfold. First, let me introduce the family by telling you a story about Rundig catching. It was the first day I fell in love with the Firghils. It was summer, and I was busy coaxing bees to the vegetable garden with my penny whistle when I saw a Rundig. Rundigs love to burrow under fences and eat the leaves off of young garden plants. This, of course, was not a problem to me because a Rundig has a right to eat any food that he can get to. However, to the humans, they are pesky. A single Rundig can eat up a whole garden in a week. Rundigs are large rodents with big teeth and armored backs, making them hard to kill. So, people usually try to trap them in a cage. For the Firghils, this was Lucen's job. Lucen was an 11-year-old boy at the time of this story. His father Knighton was off to teach at the University of Larimore as he did every Thursday, and so he left Lucen in charge of Rundig catching. First, he had to find the trap. He started by searching the back room of their barn, which was unfortunately a mountain of tools, only used every once in a blue moon. Lucen just stood in the doorway, staring at the pile of what he felt could only be described as junk.
"What are you doing in here?"
asked Bellina, a confident 9-year-old, sitting astride one of their horses and looking down at Lucen.
"Looking for the live trap to catch a Rundig,"
Lucen replied.
"Good luck,"
Bellina said sarcastically.
"Thanks a lot,"
Lucen responded as he watched her ponytail bobbing up and down as she trotted away.
"Can I help?"
asked Lala, a blonde-haired 5-year-old girl. Lucen gave a look of relief at the thought of help.
"Sure,"
he said. He began to hand her things to set aside, but help was short-lived because when he handed her a wooden hoop, her eyes lit up, and she said,
"I think I'm gonna go play."
"Fine,"
Lucen muttered as she ran away with the hoop in her hand. He made it all the way through the storage room and did not find the cage. In frustration, he shoved everything back into the storage room. As was often the case when he couldn't find something, the only thing he could think to do was ask his mom, even though he knew it was dangerous. Asking her for help might just result in her turning it around on him so that he actually ended up with something else to do. He stepped into the house where Cece, his 7-year-old sister, was learning to weave with his mother, while Didymus, Cece's twin brother, was reading Horace's poetry collection, a book of classic Larimorian poetry. Lucen stood waiting for his mother to acknowledge him. His mother, Salma, looked at the end of the poem reading and said,
"How can I help you?"
"Dad said I need to catch the Rundig, but I can't find the trap in the storage room. Do you know where it might be?"
"Check with your Peepop and take this with you."
she said, holding out the history of the world.
"You need to read chapter 10 today."
And there it was. She simultaneously gave him a genius solution of asking his grandfather and handed him something else to do. He made his way to his grandparents' cabin next door and found his grandfather sharpening tools for harvest.
"Hey, Peepop, have you seen a live trap for catching a Rundig?"
Peepop looked up, with a smile cracking his bearded face. "Lucen, good to see ya. Yes, I'm sure I have a live trap." Peepop took him straight to a live trap and helped him get it set in the garden with some bait. All Lucen had to do was sit and watch, and pull the string to make the supporting stick pull out so that the cage would fall down over the Rundig. Lucen sat for a long time, waiting patiently, but after a couple of hours he remembered the assignment from his mom. It wouldn't normally be a big deal to miss an assignment, but if he didn't finish his assignment, he would fall behind. Falling behind was no good this week because he might have to miss pig racing with his friend Nick on Saturday, while his mom made him finish his studies. He opened his book and began reading chapter 10. He was thankful that the reading was history because he loved history. He read about Jobber the Wise, who saved Larimore from famine by befriending the elves, who showed them how to make more efficient irrigation for their crops. When he finished the reading, he looked up, and it dawned on him that he had gotten sucked in and hadn't been watching the trap. As he looked at the trap, his heart sank. The trap was empty, and the bait was gone. He felt angry and sad all at once. He didn't like jobs like this. Ever since moving outside the city to the homestead, he had to do jobs like this. Sometimes it was enough to overwhelm him. It was enough to bring tears, which made it even worse. He didn't want to tell his dad that he failed, and he definitely didn't want to cry in front of him, but things weren't looking good. As Lucen looked out over the garden, he realized just how much damage the Rundig had done to the garden. He tried again the next day, but the Rundig did not even come to the trap. Now he was really worried because his father was returning that night. He felt even worse when he realized that the Rundig had done more damage to the other parts of the garden. While he was watching the trap, it must have been eating in other parts without him noticing. He felt like a failure. That night, when his father came home and they all sat down for dinner, including Peepop and his grandma KK, he noticed that the meal was smaller than normal. He could not help but feel that it was his fault. He waited for the question about his success with the trap. The answer to the question would seal his doom. He would not only be ridiculed by Bellina for the small meal, but pig racing would be out of the question. He would be stuck at home trying to catch the Rundig. "How did it go with the Rundig?" asked Knighton. Lucen looked down at his food and said sheepishly,
"I didn't get him."
He waited for a comment from someone about how this small meal was his fault, but instead his father said, "Let's thank the author for this meal that he has written into our story." Despite the small portion, they all sang these verses. "Thank you for this food that none of us deserve. Thank you for this good that gives us strength to serve. Our story's good with less, and it's good with more. It's always you we bless, however full our store." As they sang, light formed a small ball in the center of the table, and in a short time, wisps of light like wings could be seen in the ball of light. Then the winged ball of light began to dart around the room, before ultimately soaring out of the house and off to the author at his dwelling place on top of the great spire. As strange as this sounds, it was a common happening in the Firghil's household. There were constantly messages being sent to the author on wings of light because they wanted a relationship with the author of their story. This specific time I am sharing with you was one of the moments that greatly endeared me to this family because they sent a message of thankfulness to the author in a moment when portions were small. Not every family accepted that they were characters in the author's story. Even fewer were ready to thank him for his good story during moments when it was hard to see the good. The next day, Knighton baited the trap with what Cece had named
Stinky dirt leaves.
It was a purple leaf plant that had a very strong scent, and no one really liked it, but the leaves had health benefits, so they were used to taking them to help with a cold. Knighton explained that he had asked a zoologist at the university about how to bait a Rundig, and apparently they had said stinky dirt leaves were the best. Lucen was still in charge of pulling the trip string to drop the cage when the Rundig took the bait. He was glad to have the help of his dad and Peepop keeping him company, but time was not on his side because pig racing was supposed to start in only a few hours, and he was almost sure that Rhodey, his red potbelly, would win if he entered him in the race this year. His Peepop had told him about how the elves loved to eat Rundig and could put a spear right in between the plates of armor on a Rundig's back without trapping him first. Lucen wished he had that kind of skill. Lucen was getting impatient after waiting for about an hour when all of a sudden the Rundig waddled up to the cage. Lucen felt his heart begin to race. He tried not to panic as he kept his wide eyes fixed on the Rundig. He was waiting for the Rundig to get completely under the cage. Finally, the Rundig got his little tail in far enough that the cage could fall. Peepop started to pat Lucen's arm to urge him to pull. Lucen yanked with all his might, and the cage fell. Peepop moved faster than Lucen had ever seen him move. Laughing the entire way to the cage, he immediately jumped on top of the cage before the Rundig knocked the cage over. "Ha ha! Come on, Lucen! Lock it down! Ha ha!" Peepop laughed. Lucen jumped up, started fumbling with the 4 latches while the Rundig flopped around. Finally, he got all 4 latches. "You got him, boy! Ha ha!" Peepop shouted in excitement as he patted Lucen's back. "Nice work, gentlemen," Knighton said as he ran up with a spear in his hand. "Do you want to do the honors, or do you want me to do it?" he asked, looking at Lucen. Before Lucen could answer, Bellina ran up shouting,
Don't you dare!
She threw herself between them and the cage.
He's just a creature trying to live.
"Honey, we can't just release him. He'll come right back," Knighton explained.
Then take him far enough away that he can't find his way back,
she retorted. Lucen could see where this was headed, and he didn't like the sound of it. He was going to get roped into an all-day trip, taking this Rundig miles and miles away, which would make him miss the pig race. Then he got an idea that just might solve his problem.
I can take him where he won't come back,
Lucen said.
You promise you won't kill him?
Bellina asked.
I promise,
Lucen said. Then Lucen took the Rundig on a wagon out toward the elf village. If there was one group of people that had no qualms about killing a Rundig, it was the elves. He dragged it right up to the edge of the village, where outsiders could come for trading. He was greeted by a tall elf with the typical pointed ears, long bearded hair, and leather garments. In just a few short minutes, Lucen had negotiated a trade of the Rundig for a new stone knife and sheath. He knew that they would eat the Rundig, but in the end he had kept his promise not to kill the Rundig, and had solved their Rundig problem. Now he had just enough time to get to the pig race.